Lads, lasses, and the rest of the masses, welcome back to another episode of the Grayscale, the series in which we take 7 points from the last Chelsea game and weigh them up on the scale from good points all the way to bad points, and then at the end we can vote for our grey grade, which you guys can do down in the comments below. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that this list is going to be one of the more negative ones that we've had in a while. A lot of the stuff we've been doing recently is very, very good, and a lot of the stuff does go into the good box. And though there will be some goods that I talk about today, I think the majority of the points I will be talking about are going into the other two boxes. I think the first thing that we want to mention here is Rhys James, and he's going in the good box. I think that all of our defenders, in truth, had defensively very good games. It was more offensively where I felt that they kind of struggled, which I know sounds a bit funny considering they are defenders, but Rhys James, of course, is one of those, and I think that he had a really, really good game at that right centre-back spot, basically locking down that right side for the majority of the time, getting a yellow card, which I don't think was a yellow card, was but apart from that, I don't think he really put much of a foot wrong. He completely shut down that side, and they didn't really get many inroads against him, as many wingers so often don't be able to do that. I think he kind of epitomised how good our defence was yesterday. And yeah, just again, another classic captain's performance from Rhys James, where he sets that example for the rest of the defenders. And in general, the defence was pretty good. Now that segues pretty nicely into the next player I'm going to be putting in. I'm going to be putting him into the medium box, and that's for Josh Achimpong. Now I think that this obviously is the box which kind of balances out when a player does really well and has something that kind of irks me and I have to knock them down, or they do quite poorly and then they have something that's good that knocks them up, right? This is what this box is for. For Josh, it's the former. I think that he played pretty well in terms of his defensive capabilities, and up against a really, really good target man in Jean-Philippe Mateta, he did really, really well at defending him and marshalling him as well as he can, which is very especially impressive for a 19-year-old making only his third start in the Premier League, I believe. So good performance from him defensively. However, there is a few kind of things I noticed from his performance which did irk me, and I do want to mention because it leads me on to another point that we're going to be putting in the bad box. And that's his kind of, forward passing and the ability to try and unlock things in the middle and try and get things direct through the first layer of the press. He just was not capable of doing this, and he has not got the experience to play in the central centre-back role, in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, that's not me saying that he's a bad player. He just simply isn't experienced enough playing there. Obviously, as he plays there more often, he will get used to doing that and will understand the role a bit more. But it really felt like he wasn't kind of, making things happen as much as someone like Tosin would, for example, if he was playing. I think it was quite apparent that we really, really lacked that kind of direct ball from the centre, and that goes through a lot of players in the team in general. I think a lot of the players kind of in those central areas needed to be a bit more proactive with their passing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But it felt really kind of, it felt kind of a bit of a shame because of how good a performance he put in, but there was just like, those few stray passes that he gave it away to certain players. Obviously, I have to mention he gives away the ball, which eventually leads to them getting the free kick, which eventually leads to them scoring. Obviously, that's disallowed, but it's a cause for concern when he's doing things like that, obviously. And again, I'm not going to be too harsh because he is literally only 19 years old, but it's just a worry for this season, considering, and here's where the third point comes in, Levi Cowell's injury. Now, I probably undersold this when I did my Premier League predictions at how big of a problem this would actually be for our club, simply because I felt like we had adequate replacements for him. The reality kind of struck pretty quickly in this Palace game that without Colwill in the side, we don't have that direct ball through the middle unless Tosin is playing. And Tosin obviously being injured at the same time was a really, really bad thing for us. We kind of struggled to start that first phase of build up and kind of get through the press that Palace were doing, because let's be honest, we did struggle against them sitting back and playing deep and obviously having the five in the back, but it was also them pressing throughout the game and us not being able to get through the midfield as well, which is something that we're usually pretty good at doing. And without Colwell's kind of, direct forward passing into the front players like Joao Pedro, for example, who again I think didn't have a very good game, he didn't really get involved because he couldn't really, or through to the midfielders to then then go through to the wide areas or what have you. We just didn't have that ball at all, and it felt like we were just really pedestrian in general because we didn't have that direct pass through the centre. Now, I'm going to be going back into the medium here to talk about something I just mentioned a few moments ago, and that was the decision about, obviously, the free kick that happened, the disallowed goal, the VAR disallowed goal, and I'm going to be giving a medium for the referees here. Because, and this is, I think this might be the first time I've ever put them in the medium box. I've kind of only ever put them in good or bad. Majority of the time they're in bad, let's be honest. But I think the referees did a really good job in that specific decision, right? I've said this before. We have a rule book in football. I believe that it should always be not a subjective thing. I feel like rules need to be more cut and dry and kind of, is or isn't football rules are, the better. And this is a clear case of the referees actually using the rule book to good effect, right? They rarely ever actually use the rule book by the way that it's actually written, and that really bugs me a lot of the time. Whereas in this decision, they actually used the protocol properly, right? Regardless of whether you think it's harsh or whether you think it's kind of against the spirit of the game or what have you, I would rather have a sport and a competition that is fairly judged based on the writing of the rules. And I would expect that now that this has happened in this game, obviously the ruling being, and if you didn't know what actually happened there, the ruling being that Mark Gay was too close to the wall before the ball was struck, so the goal was overturned because you're not allowed to be within 1 meter. It wasn't actually for the push that he did, and that's kind of the interesting thing there, is that they put their foot down. The referees actually had some balls for once and said, you know what, no, you've broken a rule here, we're going to actually enforce the law. Like, it's something they don't do very often, and I'm glad that they did it in this game, and I would expect that going forward from this point, they're going to be cracking down on this more. They're going to be cracking down on a lot of things more, like holding in the box. I know they said they want to kind of, try and stop that from happening as often, things like that. I would like to see that happen. I don't want to see a game of football where it's one rule for me, one rule for thee type of thing. I don't want to see referees completely ignoring pieces of writing that are in the actual official rule book just because it doesn't suit the occasion or is a bit subjective. I don't like that. The reason why I put it in medium, though, and not good, despite me praising that, is because there absolutely should have been a red card for Jean-Philippe Mateta in this game, and it's one which is not spotted by the referee for some reason, but yeah. He's already on a yellow. He does a horror tackle on Caicedo, I believe it is, studs up into the ankle. It should be a second yellow. He should be off. And this is part of the reason what I kind of put this in here for. It's not just for that one decision. It's more so for the decision in general. And again, we're speaking about a lot about the rule book and stuff. I believe that there should be on-field reviews for VAR for second yellow cards. That absolutely needs to be. Because this is one of the things which frustrates me, because this is a major decision that could instantly change this game. Them going down to 10 men is something that could have got us into the game, gotten us a goal, and we don't get that opportunity because this decision isn't given properly. I think this is a very simple thing where the referee can just go to the monitor, see the challenge, and deem whether it should be a second yellow card, because there's a difference between it being a yellow card decision and being a second yellow card decision. Acting like it's the same thing is completely ludicrous to me, because a second yellow card obviously results in a red card anyway, so it should just be a red card decision. Very, very silly in terms of that. But yeah, I think it's also argued that, for example, Rhys James, when he makes that kind of accidental tackle on Enzo when he gets nutmegged during the game, that should also be checked, because that should be a situation where the Palace fans are probably thinking the same thing that I'm thinking with this Mateta challenge, that he should probably be off. I don't think he should be, because I think it's a little bit it's more so, what can I really do there? Because he's just been megged and he's kind of just standing there and he runs into him. But that's the subjectivity that we do allow in football with those types of decisions. I think having a studs up challenge on the back of someone's leg isn't oopsie, that's not a yellow card, but there we go. But yeah, we're putting the refs in medium today for basically the first time in a long time. Now we're going back into the bads here for our next point, and it's going to be for Enzo Maresca, and not because I think he did anything particularly wrong, let's say. I don't think it was a matter of we set up poorly or we had a wrong team selection or what have you, but it's more so just for the kind of the inability to get our players, doing the right things at times in this game, where I felt like obviously it was quite clear to everyone that was in the stadium, everyone that was watching at home, that we were passing the ball too slowly. We weren't getting the direct balls through the middle like I've spoken about before. We weren't getting the ball out to the wingers and stretching the defence enough. It felt like we were doing a lot of backwards and sideways passing and didn't have that injection of forward like kind of movement, because we were just passing around the back. And again, I think part of that is due to the fact that we didn't have Colwill or Tosin in the side, and Achimbong and Chalobah are just simply not good enough to get the ball up the pitch forward. I felt like the midfielders in this game really struggled, and again, I can't blame Maresca too much for that, but I think it would have been alleviated if we weren't going through the centre as much, and we were, if we were trying to spread it out wide and trying to stretch that back five of Palace, which obviously you need to do against these types of sides. You need to move it quickly. You need to, manoeuvre the enemy team around so they can't just sit in their shape, and that's what Palace did for the whole game. They were so comfortable. The thing is, which is frustrating about it the most, is that we saw that eventually when we did start doing these things late on in the game, and when we started growing back into the game, we started finding some success and getting some chances. And I think that is really down to a few players who I'm going to be putting in the good box here. The first of which is Esteval. Now, I said in my preview that I wanted him to start because I felt like he is one of the players that we have in the side that is a real difference maker in terms of the fact that he can just come onto the pitch and make something happen out of nothing. And in these types of games where you're playing against very solid defenses, very compact defenses, you need someone that's going to inject that spark of just magic happening, right? You can't have these players that are just going to, like a Pedro Neto, for example, who's just going to pass the ball back every time. You need someone who's going to, take on his man, take on two men, not be afraid when he gets doubled up on to go forward and try and make things happen. As soon as he came on the pitch, we instantly improved. But the problem was, again, we weren't getting it out to him enough, which really frustrates me. We were kind of going down the left-hand side a bit more. I felt like if we just kept giving him the ball, something was eventually going to happen, and we do get a few chances off of him kind of dribbling past people and bursting down to the byline and getting balls across. And though we don't get the chances in the end to actually go in the net, I feel like he was a clear improvement on what we already had on that side at the time. Likewise, the same could be said for our final point here, and that's Liam Delap. And the reason why I'm putting him in here is not just because he changed the game, in my opinion, in terms of being a physical presence up top and being, way more involved than Joao Pedro got involved. I think that it showed, and the reason why I'm putting this in good is because it's a good thing for the future, right? I'm not going to be a person that's too reactionary about this result. Palace are a very good team. The last two teams they have beaten in competitions are Liverpool and Manchester City. They are a very good side, and in fact, us getting a draw against them at this point is actually a pretty good result considering they're undefeated in like 11 games or something like that. I'm not going to overreact too much to this game, and instead I'm going to be looking to the future and the future games that we have coming up and take the positives going into those. And one of the positives was that Liam Delap really showed that not only off the bench, but if we want to, against these pragmatic sides that are really hard to kind of break down, he's going to be a real answer to that, wherein someone like Joao Pedro doesn't really suit that as much. And having two profiles that can do different things is so nice to have, and he really bullied the Palace defenders when he came on, just made it really horrible for them to try and, settle as much as they could. He almost had the chance to actually get the winner as well. Unfortunately didn't get to take his chance though. But yeah, again, just like I said with Esteval, he instantly improved the team as soon as he came on the pitch, and I felt like we probably needed to have him on from the start, if I'm being honest. I feel like it would have probably suited us a little bit more. Same thing goes for Esteval. I think if both of these two were starting, we would have probably done a lot better, but you live and you learn. We move on to West Ham, which will obviously be a much easier game considering how they just got absolutely battered by Sunderland. Now let me know who you're going to be voting for your grade great in the comments down below as always. For mine, I think I'm going to be putting in Rhys James simply because he kind of embodies that defensive solidity that we had during the game yesterday, and I think that that's a good platform for us to build off for the next games. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like, it really helps out the channel massively, and for more content like this, don't forget to subscribe as well. Stay tuned for more Chelsea content in the coming days. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and remember, football can be as simple as black and white.
Something ain't right, I'm drowning in the ocean. I'm still alive, but I feel the fall in motion. I lost the fight and now I'm finally floating, but I still try to hide my emotion. Who am I in pieces? I've been broken. It's black and white, but my